let's bring in Elliotte Friedman. It's time now for 3 of 31 with Elliotte Friedman, brought to you by the Next Generation GMC Sierra. We are professional grade. Make sure, of course, to check out Elliotte's 31 Thoughts column on Sportsnet.ca. Before we get into anything hockey related, all right, we were watching Hockey Central today, and we know you were watching Hockey Central today for Behind a Pane of Glass. What exactly was going on there, Friedge?
You're sneaking around.
You know, I walked in there and I had to throw some clothes back in the wardrobe room, and I just wanted to take a look and hear what they had to say. And I completely forgot about the possibility that Doug had a solo camera. So yes, that is me, the creeper on the right of the screen.
Yeah, we saw you roll in. I just thought you had to hear Doug's very important point there. So that's why you were kind of lingering in the background.
I've known Doug for a long time. He's never made an important point. I was waiting to hear Amber talk, and I was waiting to hear Mark Savard talk. And then Show said, you know, started waving at me like, get out of the way. And that's when I realized I'd pulled a really genius move on TV.
Well, we will never let you forget it.
I know.
Let's talk about the big news today, of course. Peter Chiarelli out as Oilers general manager. Asked back this. It felt inevitable. Are you surprised it actually happened?
No, I'm not surprised it happened. I have no desire to kick Peter Chiarelli when he's down. It's over. It's done. There was a crisis of consumer confidence in Edmonton. The fans were, not only was the team doing poorly and they want to make the playoffs, but, you know, people weren't going to games as much. The secondary ticket market was down. You know, pretty soon you have to send out your season ticket renewals, and the 3-year luxury suite renewals are coming up in Rogers Place, and, you know, people weren't going to renew. They simply were going to vote with their wallets as much as anything else, and, you know, Edmonton had to signal that a change was coming somewhere, and this is what they had to do. I know they've taken some criticism today for the way they did it. I actually think it's smart. You know, the players were going away. You want to tell the players first. He was able to get out of the building. I actually think that was a reasonable way to handle it once I heard it. But it's very clear that the market was not going to buy into the Oilers' vision under Peter Chiarelli anymore, and this team had to make a change.
You know, Elliot, they said that Keith Gretzky will sort of take over the helm for the time being. They don't want to rush this process. And Bob Nicholson saying he wants someone who can change the culture and also assess talent. What other things did you notice from what Bob said, or what do you think they're going to need to look for in order to turn this whole thing around?
Well, I think that, you know, Nicholson said something about there's something in the water here in Edmonton that, you know, we haven't won. And since they reached the Stanley Cup final and went to Game 7 in 2006, they've made the playoffs once. And I think you have to look at everything. I think you have to take a serious look at your organization top to bottom and say, what exactly is happening here? And I don't necessarily think it's just a general manager. I think it's, you know, he said very clearly, and I agree with him, it's the way you evaluate players. It's, do they go to the American Hockey League longer? Is there a way we're looking at guys? And I think that whoever the next general manager is, that's going to be the key, is what's your vision in terms of evaluating players, and what steps are you willing to take that are different than the steps that the Edmonton Oilers have always taken. I know some people there, they blame it on the old Oilers. I don't think that's necessarily true. From what I understand about the group of guys that are still around there, they have their opinions, but they don't prevent anybody from doing anything. You know, Peter Chiarelli got to make a lot of the decisions, and I don't necessarily think that like Wayne Gretzky was always 100% in agreement, but I think he understood that you have to let the general manager make the call. I think one of the questions the Oilers have to ask is their organization adapting with the times the way a lot of other organizations are? Are you looking at things differently? That's, I think, what they have to question about themselves.
We heard Nicholson say today the emphasis is still on trying to make the playoffs, but they didn't want to give up any young assets. It feels to me to improve this roster, you'd have to be willing to give something up to get a player in to help Connor McDavid in some secondary scoring. What do you think the right approach is, at least short term, for this team right now?
Well, you know, one thing he did say, Faizal, is that he said that we won't give up a young piece for, you know, a rental or something like that. He did kind of, it was a bit confusing at times because he kind of went one way at one time, and then he emphasized they weren't willing to give up on their young players. But I think the message he was trying to say is, that the only way they would even consider doing that is if they got something that was similarly young. For example, if they find another young player out there that becomes available to them, and they would look at that player and say, okay, that's the kind of thing that we might consider giving up youth for youth. But I don't think they're interested in giving up youth for rental. I think the problem is, you look at the Edmonton players that really have value. Well, you know there's one guy you're not trading because he's a nuclear weapon. You're not giving up your nuclear weapon. But the other guys who have value are the Dreisaitl's, the Nurses, the Nugent-Hopkins, the Clefbaums, and I don't think those are the guys you're really interested in giving up. So unless you can find some value for some of the secondary players on your roster, in a lot of ways, you're probably going to be going at it with a lot of the same guys that you have.
Elliot, that nuclear bomb you're referring to has been pretty quiet so far after this announcement, along with the rest of the team staying tight-lipped. What do you think he's thinking? What is McDavid thinking about this? And are they looking at this as a positive? They have to be, right?
Well, Danielle, I really believe that Connor McDavid is not the kind of guy to rock the boat. I've been really impressed the way he's handled. Look, 2 years ago, we all thought the Edmonton Oilers were on the way. There were people picking them to go to the Stanley Cup final, and it didn't necessarily seem like a bad idea. They looked like they were trending in the upward direction. And this has been hard on him. He cannot, like all great players, he cannot stand to lose. But I like the way he goes about his approach. He doesn't really complain about anything. He keeps all of his concerns internal. You know, he doesn't even complain to referees on the ice. He takes his hits and he just plays, and he goes about his business about making himself a better player. The other day he had a quote about basically saying, he said it to the media, if you're not on board here, basically get out. And I understand he said the same thing to his teammates. You know, I think he hates to lose, and if it continues in this way, eventually you're going to have a problem, but I don't think that problem is yet. I think Connor McDavid is committed to the Oilers. I think he wants to win there, and I think that he is going to do everything he can to be part of the solution and not be part of the problem. I don't think they're at a point yet where you have to worry about, hey, is he going to be upset about his future? I just don't think that's there yet. I think he believes that there is more to accomplish and they can accomplish more there.
Speaking of wanting to accomplish more and feeling like there's more there, let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about the Maple Leafs. Another game tonight against the Caps before they head into their All-Star break. Lines changing once again. Matthews, Marner playing together. Do you think this is something that helps both those players kind of break out from their respective slumps and maybe the team itself?
Well, I think it's going to give them a jolt. It's something they haven't done yet. You know, I heard, obviously, if you saw their quotes and listened to what they had to say, they're pretty excited about playing each other. You know, in a long season, when you go through slumps, I always think it's a good idea to try something different that can juice up your team a bit, and I think this will do it. I think they will enjoy playing together. And, you know, Tavares is a guy, I was reminded today, he played with a lot of different guys in New York. He went Molson, Okposo, Lee, all those different wingers he had, and he was successful with all of them. I think the interesting challenge is he comes to Toronto, Marner, who's a completely different player, and I think Marner elevated Tavares as much as Tavares elevated Marner. So that'll be an interesting challenge, but I believe he's also a great player who's a non-complainer, and he'll do whatever it takes to win. I'm curious to see how this is going to look tonight, especially against a Washington team that, you know, lately, and I still think they're really good. They're a really good team. This is, I think, more the exception than the norm. They've had problems defending lately, and that Matthews-Marner group will give them a challenge.
Elliot, we heard from Leafs general manager Kyle Dubas yesterday. I know you, got to moderate a panel with him and Bobby Webster as well. What are your impressions as he continues to come into this year, his first as a general manager? How have you been impressed, or what's your take, I guess, on how he's handled things so far in Toronto?
You know, I think that he does a really good job of not appearing rattled. You know, no matter how he might feel about something privately, he comes across very confidently in public. And I think that's very important because teams, to me, take a lot of the personality of their leaders. And if your leaders look rattled, then you're going to be rattled. You know, whatever he thinks about what's going on with the contracts or the way the team is playing, he presents publicly that he's calm. And to me, that is a very key part of leadership. I thought I was very interested in his message yesterday about Matthews. It's been pretty negative around the team lately. They've been losing games. They lost that game to Arizona on Sunday night. I think that part of that was, again, to give them a bit of a boost and to say, look, not everything here is negative. And sometimes I think the timing of the message is almost as important as the message itself. I was a bit surprised that Dubas would go public and say, yes, we're talking and we're hoping that we've made progress. But I think it came at a time where the players needed to hear that something good was going on.
And going back, Elliot, to Matthews and Martin getting this opportunity tonight, say they explode for a ton of offense and it works beautifully. Do you foresee Mike Babcock letting them try this again? Or because the break's here, he'll go back to sort of status quo because he's been resistant to doing this?
I think if they have a great game together, it's going to be really difficult, Danielle, for Babcock to make a change. You know what? Look, I think one of the things we're curious about tonight is how long does he stay with it? If it doesn't work early, does he change it back? As you mentioned, he has a comfort zone with a certain amount of things. But it's not like me to overreact to these kinds of things. It's an 82-game season. You have stretches that go well, and you have stretches that go poorly. And I honestly believe that you have changes to lines that you don't expect. Just because it happens tonight, whether it goes good or badly, doesn't mean it will or will not happen again. But the good thing about it is, in the middle of the season, it gives us a lot to look forward to and talk about. It makes my job a lot easier, and I thank them for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Elliot. It's nice to have you in full screen and not just lingering behind Faizal and I. So we appreciate you joining us.
I only creep on one show a day. That's what I say.
That's perfect. Thanks a lot, Elliot.
Take care, guys.